Welcome, everybody. Before I introduce our session facilitator, please know to write any questions you have in Q&A. We're going to have a brief Q&A, but we promise Kristin will get back to you if we don't have time to handle your question live. Kristin brings over 25 years of hands-on corporate experience as a leader, coach, group and team facilitator, strategic business planner, trainer, and driver of top performing sales and marketing teams. She's passionate about partnering with successful leaders who have a desire to maximize their potential, achieve remarkable results, and make a difference in the lives of those they work with, while navigating their own personal leadership journey. In addition to her coaching career, Kristin's career specializes in transforming low-performing teams and departments into highly successful teams, and she does this at a national level. Kristin started her career on the East Coast, where she's from, and she continues to work with executives across the U.S. Kristin has lived in Southern California for 15 years. Welcome, Kristin Campbell.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate the introduction. It's so great to meet all of you out here. And again, my name is Kristin Campbell, and I'm going to talk to you today about leading change through emotional intelligence. So in the next 30 minutes, we're going to review the reasons why mastery of emotional intelligence, or commonly known as EQ, will lead to elevated transformational leadership. I'm confident that you will see an incredible opportunity as the slides unfold to uncover your true path of EQ growth. And I should have time at the end of the session to take any questions and answers. So I look forward to talking with you then. So first, we're going to talk about what is the purpose of us meeting together today. It's to review the reasons why mastery of EQ will lead to elevated transformational leadership. We will discuss the definition of emotional intelligence, otherwise known as EQ, and what EQ is not, and that is IQ. We'll talk about the importance of EQ and how it correlates with leadership competencies. We'll also discuss the impact of EQ and leadership competencies in transformational change. So before we get started, it's important for us to be able to define what emotional intelligence is. And it is a set of emotional and social skills that collectively establish how well we perceive ourselves and others, develop and maintain social relationships, cope with challenges, and use emotional information in an effective and meaningful way. EQ is often described as those soft skills that leaders must have to lead high-performing teams in transformational change. And in simpler terms, EQ is reading the room, it's communicating with empathy, and it's regulating your emotions while you're at the workplace. And research shows that demonstrating EQ is critical for effective leadership. In fact, emotional intelligence sets 90% of top performers apart from everybody else. You can have all the technical skills in the world, but if you can't have positive interactions with coworkers, manage your own emotions, or consider other people's feelings, it is incredibly difficult, actually, to excel in a leadership role. And most importantly, EQ is not that elusive it factor that you can't develop. You actually can develop it and practice it over time. So let's talk about what emotional intelligence is not. Cognitive intelligence, or IQ, is what EQ is not. And emotional intelligence is estimated to account for 27 to 45% of job success. EQ and IQ are not highly correlated. So nothing is to suggest that if IQ is high, then EQ is high. And inversely, if IQ is low, then EQ will be low. And IQ sets and peaks around the age of 17 years, whereas EQ is not fixed, and it rises steadily with age, peaking in about the late 40s. So studies have shown that EQ, not IQ, is a predictor of success in the ability to consider emotional competencies and distinguishes leaders who are successful in organizations. For example, we have been dealing with what's going on with the post-pandemic. What is our new norm? How can we get our footing here? And we're seeing that EQ is much needed right now in our post-pandemic time. So we're all here for a common interest of transformational change. We want to know what is our part in this change and how can we make impact in our roles. So what does EQ have to do with transformational change? When going through change, leaders must be able to lead by understanding their own and others' emotions. With high EQ, a leader can motivate and inspire others through transformational change and through resistance to change. So how can we make this applicable in our leadership development? I'm going to share with you a comprehensive model that is broad in implication and flexible in application. And here you have the EQI 2.0 model. This model is able to meet you where you are in your EQ competency level, and it can also help you identify where you may develop over time. It is a practical tool, and it can be applied to each person's EQ by looking deeper into each composite and subscale. So let's do that now. So right now we've got 5 composites: self-perception, self-expression, interpersonal, decision-making, and stress management. Within these 5 composites, we have 3 what they call subscales. And then this makes a total of 15 dimensions that make up emotional intelligence, or EQ. You'll also find that in the perimeter here, it has well-being and it's got emotional and social functioning. It so happens that this tool, this model, also looks at happiness and well-being, and that's a measure of how satisfied and content we are in life. And it both contributes to and is a product of emotional intelligence. And this can be used as a barometer of emotional health and well-being. And that's important for us as we continue on our journey in our particular roles. So this model helps you understand where you are stronger and where you might be weaker. And then you can develop a plan to basically elevate your EQ based on your assessment results. The EQI is a proven and comprehensive model that allows you to organize a lot of emotional information. And it's also flexible by allowing you to zoom in and identify where you need to focus. So let's do that now. Let's zoom in. So what I did is I took stress management here from the previous slide. And if we look at the stress management composite, we can see the 3 subscales of flexibility, stress tolerance, and optimism. Each leader will have varying scores for each of these key areas. Then my role is, as the coach, is to ask them specific questions around this area. For example, how does this show up? What type of a situation are you in? And then from there, we can build a specific and actionable development plan that defines actionable outcomes and success metrics so that they know that they've elevated their EQ in that particular area. So we just discussed how we can dig into a specific composite like stress management, and we can look at its corresponding subscales depending on what the leader needs to work on based on his or her assessment results. I'm excited to share that we can take the EQ model a step further by looking at leadership potential as well. Theory and research has shown that the EQ 2.0 subscales are strongly related to 4 leadership competencies. These competencies are authenticity, insight, coaching, and innovation. And a leader who embodies these competencies is more likely to increase work satisfaction, create trust, and foster organizational commitment and loyalty. In addition, these leadership competencies have been associated with the outcomes of productivity, decreased employee turnover, and increased efficiency. So what do? How do we start here? So let's build upon the leadership competency model by mapping these 4 leadership competencies, like what we did with the composites and the subscales previously. We can begin and create a specific action plan based on your unique and individual scores in these 4 leadership competency areas of authenticity, coaching, insight, and innovation. According to research, these are the 4 general competencies required of most leaders. High scores on the associated EQ subscales help ensure optimal functioning in the competency area. Alternatively, if your score is lower on a few of these EQ subscales for a particular leadership competency, you can quickly see that this might be an area of challenge for you in your current leadership role. So focusing developmental efforts in these areas are likely to yield the greatest return in your growth as a leader. So EQ is at the base of transformational leadership. And here we are at the Leadership Forum looking at, for these next 3 days, what can we do? What is our part in transformational change? And how can we show up as a transformational leadership, as a transformational leader? Leaders aim to engage followers to create relationships that rise and raise motivation and morale with both parties, ultimately appealing to their values and sense of purpose. To accomplish this, leaders must understand each team member's motivations and emotions. This leads to trust and ultimately productivity. And furthermore, high levels of emotional intelligence can only help, not hinder, those approaching leadership from a transformational leadership style. And like a house, the foundation needs to be strong. And if you remove the foundation, then what is left? The next step is to see where do you fall in this EQ journey? And I'd love to set up a strategy session with you. And I have found that a lot of my clients look at the EQI in the following areas: in leadership development, executive development and coaching, developing high potentials, and senior leadership selection and succession planning. So yes, as a result, research is clear. And there is a correlation between transformational leadership success and higher levels of EQ. We discussed that IQ is for the most part fixed at an earlier age, but there is room for EQ growth and development later in life. The problem is that many leaders may not be aware that they need to improve their EQ, and they just don't know how to start working it for themselves or even their teams. But the good news is that there is a solution. And as an executive coach, I'm able to leverage the EQI with you and look at your specific results that include your leadership competencies and how you even rate versus top leaders in the top 50% of leaders in North America. So we could sit down and talk about what that leadership looks like for you. So if there is an interest for you, I would love to hear from you. I'll keep my contact information up for you if you have any questions at all. But I also want to then turn it over to Tom to say, Tom, if there's any questions that have come in, or if there's anything that I can address with the group on the call. Thanks you, everybody.
Thank you, Kristin. That was wonderful. A question, Kristin, who typically reaches out to you for coaching and to do the EQ assessments?
Well, a lot of times it's interesting because I have clients that are both individual contributors all the way up to the C-suite. And what I have found is those, say, first level managers that came up from an individual contributor, what I have found is that they were very successful at what they did as an individual contributor, and they were subject matter expert in all those areas. Then they got into a leadership role leading other people, and I have found that there was more of a struggle because a lot of it was the EQ piece, whether it was interpersonal relationships, whether it was stress management, impulse control, what have you. So I found, number one, it's people coming from individual contributors to first level managers of people. Secondly, also people who are getting promoted and getting promoted quickly. I have found that it's a fast pace for them. They may not have gotten their footing in each of their roles. And so people who move up the career ladder quickly, those are clients that I typically go for as well. And then I've also found in the C-suite that there are a missing piece or an element that I found. Sometimes it's well-being and happiness because of the pressures, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes it could also be interpersonal relationships, stress management, or what have you. So it's interesting, Tom, because I find people at all levels of the organization, depending on where they are, and especially even going back to the first level managers, the whole thing with what got you here won't get you there. I find that with them, they said, hey, I was really great at what I did. I got promoted because of what I did. But then the next level, we're expecting more from them.
Great. We have a question from Michelle. How do you work with EQ for large teams? And does it apply well on an organizational basis?
Yes, thank you, Michelle, for the question. Very good one. I do a lot with teams, actually. What I have found that works really well is when you do an EQ assessment with a leader, say it's the C-suite and their executive team, when we can pass it down and push it down to that leadership team, then we can all workshop it together, and I can do facilitations. Sometimes it's a 1 day or it's a 2 day, depending on the needs of the customer. And what we'll do is workshop these elements, and not only can we do it from the team to get that common language, but we can also then workshop and have them break out in groups to say, okay, what does this mean to me? This is where my scores are. So it really opens up to being vulnerable and transparent. And you will find that some people maybe in the beginning are a little bit uncomfortable, but you will find that over time that they realize like, wow, it's like the mask is off. This isn't a big deal. I'm not the only one that might be struggling with this. And they can actually have their peers and colleagues help them kind of get over a hump and help them with their development plan and how they can get better with that. In addition to that, the EQ, I was talking specifically about the 2.0, which is an individual assessment. There's also an EQ 360 as well. So you can talk about all these EQ facets from just, you can have your self-report, but then you also have reports of the 360 around you. And that's another opportunity to workshop that in a team.
Great. Kristin, a question from Patrick. How have you helped a low EQ executive have an aha moment that they would benefit by enhancing their EQ?
Thank you, Patrick. I appreciate that. What I have found is that when I do the EQ assessment, I also do it in combination with a 360. I typically do an interview style 360. And I have found that with all this data that's collected, it starts to create a picture, a very common picture, a common theme, I should say, with this individual. And the aha moment comes when we have the 360 feedback, or we have this aha moment from an EQ report, the assessment that came out. And what we'll do, the amazing part about it is that then we work on that. And then we say, okay, this is what has been created. This is what we see as results. This is now going to be our action plan, and putting those actionable goals together, and then identifying and defining, okay, what does success look like in this role? And I have seen so many clients get so much out of this, because talk about self-awareness and just upping that factor for them in terms of their leadership presence and what it is that they have been missing out on. So yes, there are quite a few aha moments when they can see it in front of them based on their assessment. Thank you, Patrick, for that.
And a question from, I hope I'm saying this right, Viswa. And the question is, what are the key areas in EQ when an individual contributor becomes promoted to a manager and needs to focus the stress in a medium-sized team?
Wow.
So a new manager with a medium-sized team, and there's a lot of change and obviously a lot of emotions that go with change.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I'll just give you an example here. I work a lot with tech, and I'm finding that a lot of folks that are subject matter experts, even engineers, they are so good at what they do. And I find that one factor with them, and even other industries and roles, is interpersonal relationships. A lot of times they were all about doing their work and doing it well. The problem is it almost creates blinders for them, and they were not able to be resourceful and go cross-functionally in an effective way that they could ask their peers in other functional areas, okay, what's important to you? How can I and my team help you? And that is what I found is a big aha moment for those individuals, is they were so focused on their own work and their success that they weren't working on relationships along the way. And now they're up here and they're expected not just to focus on their career pathing in their channel, but also across. So it's the breadth that I've seen that they need to focus more on.
Well, you've reminded me of, in your introduction, you talked about your passion for taking a low performing individual or team to high performing. And I think you've touched on many of the elements, but how do you get a conversation and sustain a conversation around these competencies? So in other words, you've established a language, you have the wheel. How do you create an environment where people are a little more comfortable talking about their emotions and how they affect team productivity?
You lead by example, right? You want to model what it is you're looking for. And it's interesting because I listened to Michelle's talk and she talked about that as well. She also talked about self-awareness, which was pretty cool because that's an EQ facet as well. Yeah, you lead by example. We as leaders are not expected to have all the answers. We are expected to hire a very well diverse in thought team, around us to make us and propel us to going forward. So really it's to have a compelling vision. It's to get the team involved. It's to say, hey, we're all in this together. How can I help? And rolling up your sleeves. And that is the interpersonal relationships that are really going to get you there quicker, is to have those relationships, not just with the first level down, but then beyond that, and inspire all of them. And being along their side with them. And the other big thing is not just the interpersonal relationships, Tom, but it's the empathy that goes with it. And that's an EQ facet as well, is empathy. And empathy goes a long way as a leader who has empathy, who is compassionate, who's a driver of the business, but at the same time is thinking about others and putting themselves in others' shoes.
And we have time for one more question if anyone wants to pop in. If not, thank you, Kristin, for a great presentation. And I encourage everybody to get out your phone, screenshot, and connect. You're getting applause. I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thank you, Tom. I appreciate your help. Thank you all. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions at all. If we couldn't get your question in this session, I'd be more than happy to follow up.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.